My beloved child. There is a silence surrounding the person you love that feels almost impossible to explain. Every smile they show the world hides a conversation they refuse to let anyone hear. They have rehearsed the same words in their mind again and again, yet every time your face appears, those words disappear before reaching their lips. What they are protecting is not a simple secret, it is a decision they believe will change everything exactly 2 weeks from now. Stay with this story, because every moment reveals another piece that has been hidden in plain sight. Something changed the day they realized their heart could no longer carry two different versions of the same future. Since then, they have started noticing little details that nobody else would ever recognize. Their late-night thoughts have become longer, their quiet moments heavier, and every ordinary conversation with you now feels like it could secretly become unforgettable. They desperately hope you never notice these changes because if you did, every excuse they have carefully built would fall apart. But the closer that mysterious day comes, the harder it becomes to hide what has already begun inside them, and what happens next may completely rewrite everything you thought you understood. There is one memory they keep returning to over and over again. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. Yet it became the exact moment that planted a question they have never been able to answer. Since then, every decision has quietly pointed toward the same destination, even while they pretended everything was perfectly normal. They never wanted you to connect the clues because once the pattern becomes visible, nothing can ever look ordinary again. The truth is moving toward you much faster than either of you realizes, and by the time the final piece appears, even they may no longer be able to stop what has already been set in motion. Before those 2 weeks finally arrive, one unexpected sign will appear where nobody thinks to look. It will seem too small to matter at first, almost easy to ignore, but later it will become impossible to forget. That single moment will expose why they have been acting differently and why they have fought so hard to keep you from discovering what has been growing inside their heart. The ending they have planned is not as simple as it seems, because another hidden truth is waiting just beyond it, and when that truth finally steps into the light, everything you believed about this story will be turned upside down. A strange feeling is following the person you love everywhere they go. It arrives without warning, stays longer than expected, and disappears before anyone else can notice it. Every morning they wake up believing today will finally be the day they tell you everything, but every evening they choose silence instead. They keep convincing themselves that protecting you is kinder than revealing what has been quietly growing inside their heart. Don't skip, because the next truth explains why those 2 weeks matter more than anyone could imagine. There is something they discovered that completely changed the direction of their thoughts. It was not a message, not a phone call, and not something another person whispered into their ear. It was a realization that arrived unexpectedly, leaving them unable to return to the version of themselves you have always known. Since that moment, they have been watching every conversation with different eyes, searching for one perfect opportunity that never seems to arrive. The closer the calendar moves toward that hidden date, the more impossible it becomes to pretend that nothing is changing. What makes this even more surprising is that you have already witnessed several clues without realizing they were connected. A pause that lasted a little longer than usual. A smile that disappeared too quickly. A goodbye that felt strangely unfinished. None of those moments seemed important on their own, but together they form a picture they desperately hoped you would never see. Deep inside, They know the truth cannot stay hidden forever, because every secret eventually begins revealing itself through the smallest details. The most unbelievable part has not happened yet. Just before those 2 weeks come to an end, one completely unexpected encounter will force them to question every promise they made to themselves. In that single moment, they will realize there is no safe way to continue hiding what has been locked inside for so long. They believe they are preparing for an ending, but destiny may already be preparing something they never expected. And when that final realization arrives, the secret they fought so hard to protect will become impossible to keep buried any longer. A quiet battle has already begun inside the heart of the person you love, and nobody around them can see it. Every ordinary moment feels heavier because they know the countdown is moving faster than anyone realizes. They keep telling themselves that if they remain calm, the truth will never find its way to you. But the strange part is that the harder they try to hide it, the more obvious their silence becomes. Stay till the end, because what happens next changes the meaning of everything that came before. There is one final piece they have never spoken about. It is a promise they made to themselves long ago, believing it would protect both of you from disappointment. For a while, that promise seemed easy to keep. Now it feels like a chain they can no longer carry. Every passing day brings them closer to a choice they never imagined making, and they are beginning to understand that some decisions cannot remain hidden forever. The future they planned is starting to slip away before they can hold on to it. Then something completely unexpected interrupts their carefully prepared plan. A simple moment, so ordinary that almost anyone else would ignore it, suddenly reminds them of everything they have been trying to leave behind. That memory refuses to disappear. It follows them through every conversation, every quiet evening, and every restless night until they finally realize that running from the truth has only made it stronger. They wanted those 2 weeks to mark a silent ending, but now they are wondering whether they were walking toward the wrong destination all along. The most shocking revelation is still waiting just ahead. Before those 2 weeks finally pass, one hidden truth will rise to the surface and force them to confront what they have avoided for far too long. They will stand between the future they carefully planned and the feelings they never truly left behind. At that exact moment, everything will depend on a single choice that neither of you sees coming. And when that choice is finally made, the story will take a direction no one could have predicted from the beginning. Everything they believed they could control is beginning to slip through their hands. The closer those 2 weeks become, the more impossible it feels to keep pretending that nothing has changed. Every quiet glance, every unfinished sentence, and every unexpected silence carries a meaning they hoped you would never discover. They are starting to realize that the truth has a way of revealing itself, even when nobody speaks a single word. There is one final conversation they have imagined countless times, yet it has never happened. In their mind, they know exactly how it begins, but they can never decide how it ends. That uncertainty has become their greatest fear. They thought ending this chapter would bring peace, but instead it has filled every day with questions they cannot escape. The future they planned no longer looks as certain as it once did, and that uncertainty is becoming impossible to ignore. Then the unexpected happens. A small detail, forgotten by almost everyone else, suddenly reminds them why your story was never as simple as they tried to believe. In that instant, every reason they created for walking away begins to lose its strength. The walls they built around their emotions start to crack, and they realize they may have misunderstood their own heart from the very beginning. What they once called an ending now feels like the beginning of an entirely different path. The final days of that countdown will reveal something neither of you expected. A hidden truth will rise at exactly the right moment, forcing them to choose between the decision they secretly prepared and the feelings they have never truly left behind. They know they cannot delay that choice any longer. But the greatest surprise is still waiting beyond it, because the decision they finally make will uncover a mystery that has been quietly growing since the very first moment this story began. The morning they feared finally begins to arrive, but nothing unfolds the way they expected. Instead of feeling certain, they are overwhelmed by a strange calm that makes them question every step they planned to take. They look back at every shared memory and realize that some moments were speaking long before either of you understood their meaning. The ending they kept preparing suddenly feels farther away than ever before, and that unexpected feeling changes everything. For the first time in weeks, they stop running from their own thoughts. They admit to themselves that the secret was never really about leaving. It was about protecting a part of their heart they believed had become too fragile to reveal. Every quiet smile they hid, every conversation they shortened, and every emotion they buried was an attempt to stay in control. Now they understand that control was only an illusion, and the truth has already begun writing its own ending. Then comes the moment they never planned for. They notice one small detail that instantly reminds them why your presence has remained impossible to erase from their heart. It is not a dramatic event or a grand sign. It is something so simple that almost anyone else would overlook it. Yet that single moment becomes powerful enough to undo weeks of silent determination, leaving them completely unprepared for what they suddenly feel. As the final days of the countdown continue, they stand between two completely different futures. One path asks them to follow the decision they secretly carried for so long. The other asks them to listen to the feelings they spent weeks trying to silence. They know they cannot stand there forever. But what they still do not realize is that one final revelation is already moving toward them, and when it arrives, the choice they thought was already made will become the hardest decision they have ever faced. The final week begins with a silence that feels different from every silence before it. The person you love can no longer convince themselves that everything will go according to plan. Every hour seems to whisper the same reminder, telling them that the moment they have been avoiding is now impossible to escape. They thought time would make their decision easier, but instead it has made every emotion stronger than ever before. Without expecting it, they begin noticing things they ignored for far too long. Old conversations suddenly carry new meaning. Forgotten memories return with surprising clarity. Even the smallest moments now seem connected, as if they have been leading toward this exact point all along. They start wondering if they misunderstood the story from the very beginning, and that single question refuses to leave their mind. Then, something completely unexpected happens. A quiet realization arrives with such force that it shakes every promise they made to themselves. For the first time, they stop thinking about how to end this chapter and begin thinking about what might happen if they never do. That thought frightens them because it opens a future they never allowed themselves to imagine. The walls around their heart, built so carefully over time, begin to fall one by one. Now the countdown feels more mysterious than ever. They are standing only days away from the choice they believed was already decided, yet everything inside them is changing. They know one final moment is still waiting, a moment that will reveal whether this story truly reaches its ending or transforms into something completely different. And when that final truth appears, neither you nor they will ever look at these past 2 weeks in the same way again. A single thought keeps returning to them no matter how hard they try to push it away. It arrives in the quietest moments, reminding them that some decisions are made with the mind, but the heart refuses to accept them. They have reached the point where pretending feels more exhausting than telling the truth. Every passing hour makes that hidden burden heavier, and they can feel the moment of revelation drawing closer than ever before. They begin replaying every memory you shared together, searching for the exact moment when everything started to change. At first, they believed the answer would be obvious, but the deeper they look, the more they realize the truth was never about one single event. It was built through countless small moments that neither of you noticed at the time. Those forgotten moments now return with incredible clarity, making it impossible for them to ignore what their heart has been trying to say all along. Then comes the most unexpected realization of all. They understand that the ending they spent weeks preparing was never truly meant to protect you. It was meant to protect themselves from facing emotions they were too afraid to admit. That discovery changes everything. The certainty they once carried begins to disappear, replaced by a question they never wanted to ask: what if walking away creates the very loss they were trying to avoid? Now only a little time remains before the countdown reaches its final point. The secret they guarded so carefully is no longer safe inside them, and every heartbeat feels like another step toward the moment when everything must finally be revealed. They know there is no turning back once that moment arrives. But the greatest twist is still hidden just beyond it, because the truth waiting at the end is nothing like the one they believed they were hiding from the beginning. The countdown has almost reached its final moments, yet the person you love feels more uncertain than ever before. They once believed they were walking toward a clear ending, but every step now pulls them in a different direction. Their heart has started asking questions their mind can no longer answer. The closer they come to that promised day, the more they realize that the biggest secret was never hidden from you, it was hidden from themselves. One quiet moment changes everything. Without warning, they see something that reminds them of the future they almost threw away. It is not a grand event or a dramatic discovery. It is a simple reminder that some connections refuse to disappear, no matter how much distance or silence surrounds them. That single realization breaks through every excuse they have repeated for weeks, leaving them unable to ignore what they truly feel. For the first time, they stop planning an ending and begin imagining what would happen if they chose a completely different path. The fear that once controlled every decision slowly loses its power. Hope, which they believed had already faded, quietly returns. They understand that walking away might solve nothing at all, because the emotions they have been running from would only follow them wherever they go. The answer they searched for outside themselves has been waiting inside their heart all along. Now only one final moment remains before everything is revealed. The decision they thought was already written is about to be tested by a truth they never expected to face. When those 2 weeks finally come to an end, they will stand before the biggest choice of their life, knowing there is no place left to hide. And when that choice is finally made, the real story will begin in a way that nobody could have predicted from the very first word. The day they feared has finally arrived, but it does not feel the way they imagined. Instead of certainty, they feel a deep silence that refuses to leave them. Every plan they carefully created now seems incomplete, as though one important piece has been missing from the beginning. They stand still, realizing that the next few moments will decide far more than they ever expected. As they take one last look at everything that led them here, a hidden truth becomes impossible to ignore. They were never trying to end a connection. They were trying to escape the fear of being misunderstood. That fear quietly controlled every decision, every hesitation, and every secret they carried. Now they understand that fear can change a person's choices, but it can never erase what is truly written inside the heart. Then the unexpected finally happens. Before they can follow the path they had chosen, something completely unplanned stops them in their tracks. It is not luck, and it is not coincidence. It is a moment so perfectly timed that it forces them to question every conclusion they believed was final. In that instant, they realize the future they imagined no longer feels like the future they truly want. With only one final step remaining, they know there is no reason left to keep hiding. The secret that lived in silence for so long is ready to come into the light, and once it does, nothing between you will ever feel the same again. The ending they promised themselves has quietly disappeared, replaced by a choice that neither of you saw coming. But the greatest revelation is still waiting, because the final chapter will uncover why this entire journey had to happen exactly as it did. The final truth no longer waits in the distance. It stands directly in front of the person you love, asking for a decision that can no longer be delayed. They close their eyes for a brief moment, hoping the answer will somehow become easier. Instead, they finally understand that the heart has been speaking the truth long before the mind was willing to listen. Every memory returns one last time, but now each one carries a completely different meaning. The conversations they almost forgot suddenly become impossible to ignore. The moments they once dismissed now reveal the pattern that had been hidden from the very beginning. They realize those 2 weeks were never about preparing to end your story. They were about discovering whether their feelings were strong enough to survive every doubt they created themselves. Then comes the moment that changes everything. Instead of following the path they secretly planned, they choose to let go of the fear that controlled them for so long. The burden they carried quietly begins to disappear, replaced by a sense of peace they have not felt in a very long time. They finally accept that some connections cannot be measured by distance, silence, or uncertainty. The truth they fought to hide has become stronger than the secret itself. As this chapter reaches its end, one mystery still remains. The choice has been made, but its full meaning has not yet been revealed. What happens next will uncover why every delay, every unanswered question, and every silent moment had a purpose greater than either of you could have imagined. And when that final revelation arrives, you will realize this was never the story of an ending at all. It was the beginning of something neither heart expected, yet both were quietly moving toward from the very first moment. The silence between you is no longer empty. It has become a bridge leading toward the one conversation that has been delayed for far too long. The person you love knows there is nowhere left to hide because every unanswered feeling has finally reached the surface. What once looked like an ending now feels like the final test before a completely different future begins. They quietly admit something they never thought they would face. The greatest struggle was never choosing between staying or leaving. It was finding the courage to stop pretending that their heart had already made up its mind. Every doubt they carried slowly fades as they realize that truth always asks to be spoken, no matter how long it has been locked away. That realization changes the direction of everything they believed was already decided. Then an unexpected moment brings complete clarity. A single glance, a familiar memory, and one unspoken feeling suddenly fit together like pieces of a puzzle that had been scattered for weeks. They finally understand why every attempt to walk away felt incomplete. The connection they tried to silence never disappeared, it simply waited for them to become honest with themselves. In that instant, the fear that controlled their choices loses its power forever. Now only one final revelation remains. The person you love is no longer preparing to protect a secret but preparing to reveal the truth they once believed could never be spoken. They know the next step will change everything, and they are ready to accept whatever comes after it. But the greatest surprise is still waiting beyond that moment, because the truth they are about to share is far more powerful than either of you ever imagined when this story first began.